Hello there, welcome to the Art of Feeling Better podcast. And on today's episode, I'm chatting to Chris Jones, who is the CEO of Smart Curriculum. And we're starting off our topic of the current moment around education and the education system, which you may or may not know is a particular passion of mine and something that I've worked for a good few years to try and influence some fundamental changes that are so desperately needed. Chris is doing amazing things with his organisation, and there's a collection of inspirational educators who are coming together on the 1st of May to do something really quite special. So I thought I'd catch up with Chris and have a little chat about some of the work that he's doing, find out a little bit more about Smart Curriculum, and of course, some top tips about how we can change the world, how we can all feel better in the moment, and favourite song, most importantly, for the Spotify playlist. So take a look and see what happens when I caught up with Chris. Chris, welcome to the Art of Feeling Better podcast. I'm really grateful for you giving me some time today. I know you know a little bit about what we're trying to do and what my aim is. Just speaking to as many, interesting, brilliant people that I come across as possible that are doing great things in the world. And my particular passion is within education, although I may not. People don't normally judge that when they first come across me, but I'm really interested and really passionate about changing the face of education, which is how we met in the first place. So I just wanted to have a little chat and catch up with you today and just hear a little bit more about what you're doing with Smart Curriculum, because it's just so exciting, and it's great for me to be able to meet people now all over the world that are doing similar things but in different ways. Recognizing some of the fundamental issues and problems that are going on and actually taking some positive action to do cool things. So I'd like to connect the dots and bring these people together. So, and we'll talk at the end as well about, we've got something exciting coming up on the 1st of May that will bring some great people into the room. So just as a little bit of background, if you just tell me a little bit, whatever you're happy to share about your background and why you came up with the concept and what it is that you're doing with Smart Curriculum.
Jane, thank you. And it's great to be here. When you're asked to do this kind of thing, you reflect on all sorts of things around, the journey. I was in teaching for 25 years. So, did my own schooling, went to uni. Then my uni experience was slightly different because I did a design degree, but was designed with education. So a lot of my mindset was around problem solving, around design theory, so it was about very doing things rather than knowing things.
Yeah.
So I started as actually a woodwork teacher back in the early 80s, mid 80s. But I quickly got into the position where I had a different type of education to most of the people in the workshops. Mm-hmm. So I think at the end of my first year, and during the second year of teaching, so I was a young teacher, just past my probation, I was thrown into leading a department of teachers because nobody else was willing to do so. So those 25 years, actually at the chalk face, most of it was spent leading people. So I got involved in a fairly large faculty department. I think by the time I was 25, I had a team of 22.
So as an NQT to be thrown in, that's
right at the end of it was probation, and in those days that's what they referred to it as. NQT is what we now refer to it as. So very quickly I got in to leadership. Now that it was at the time when National Curriculum was introduced, or just after that period. So I was right in the middle of GCSE change from CSEs and GCEs. So we were creating new courses, we were creating new experiences, and that pretty much was the extent of my journey. I taught in a number of different schools, always in the sort of the practical department. So my field was, I was a design technologist, so I ran the workshops, but I also looked after the food, the art, the business, what people now refer to as the kind of vocational subjects, and it was very much about skill. It was very much, textiles, fashion, and I was very keen to encourage learners to get involved in doing things. And I've still got examples, and I still talk to some of the pupils that I worked with then who really appreciated it. Really did. They found it a kind of haven and a place of, it's not, I'm brain tired. We had some challenging days, of course, and there were all sorts of things that went on that needed to be managed. But it was an exciting time. It was a new subject. It was developing different propensities within learners. So that I'd got through my career, and then obviously because I'd been involved in leadership quite a lot, I then got into senior leadership in schools. And at the end of that 25 years, I was involved in creating one of the groundbreaking academies. So this is 2007 to 2010. We were involved in the academization program, and we were trying to break the mold. We were looking for different ways to achieve success for learners, and I used that expression. It wasn't just about getting the highest grades that were possible. It was about making every child feel that they were a success. And I got to a point where there was a battle between the government pushing for higher results, bigger grades, and all the tricks and fixes and all sorts of stuff that were going on, including discarding children who they knew were not going to get high grades, off-rolling as it's now called. It was against everything that I believed about education. Education was there for the betterment of every child.
Did you understand that this was happening before you got into that space, or was that kind of a penny drop moment where you thought, oh, this isn't what I got into education for?
It was a progression. It wasn't an instant. It was a progression into, I'm feeling less happy with this. I'm not comfortable with this idea that every child needs to get the highest grades they possibly can. Of course, you want the best for every child, and that's what it all should be about. But this drive to you can talk about it as skill against knowledge, but what they now call the knowledge-based curriculum. I'm still not convinced that that's the only way.
No, regurgitating information is not particularly is the only way, is it?
It isn't, and there are a lot of children that don't engage with education because they find that difficult, because they want to be out doing stuff. They want to, and the truth is, we all learn.
That's how they learn, yeah.
Yeah, we learn because we do stuff, and as we do, we get better, and we refine, and we start to ask, well, why does that work? What's going on there? I used to in teaching. One of the big, it's a silly thing really, but one of the things that I remember in teacher training, we were asked to cut joints. So we was in a workshop. There was about 45 of us all standing at a bench, and we were technical stuff. We were making lap joints, 2 bits of wood that fit together half and half. And I was given the bits of wood, and I was told, here's the saw, here's the marking out equipment, make the joint. And I remember just doing it. I just remember pick the wood. I knew what to do. I got it cut, and I cut the thought. And the lecturer came up to me and he said, look, I've been doing this for years. I have never seen anybody pick up a saw so confidently and cut the joint the way you've just cut it. Why did it work like that for you? And I didn't have an answer at that point. I just said, well, I just do what I do. I just did what I knew to do. But it left me thinking, why do I hold the saw the way I hold the saw? What is it about that skill? And it's left me feeling I could pass that on because I know what I'm doing. And it was that, those silly things sit with you for years. And it was that one thing.
Yeah, I hear you completely. So by the time you started to shift your perspective, then you started to realize that actually this isn't, I speak to so many people within health as well. I've got fingers in lots of pies, and it all seems to come back to the same issue and the same problem. And for me, everything else leads back to education, because it's what we teach our young people. Again, everything stems from that. So I think in terms of a lot of people having the same kind of experience as yourself in wanting to go into an industry for a certain reason, I can resonate the same, completely the different industry, but having an idea of what you think it's all about, and then suddenly progressively realizing that there's an undercurrent of something that doesn't feel morally or ethically the right way to go. And how on earth do you challenge that? And how do you use your skills and your knowledge to actually do something good with it?
What happened then? What was the turning point for you? And at what point did you decide that we're going to really think differently and sort of challenge that a little bit? Because it's a courageous move, isn't it, to step out completely?
It was. I mean, it was. I remember talking in family and just saying, my wife saying to me, you can't keep going like this, because it was eating away at me.
Yeah.
And I was working, by standards too much. I was trying to recover, and it didn't do my health any good, and therefore there was a point at which I had to stop. But then after we kind of decided, okay, so it's time to stop, finish, and start something different. And I say, I started what was CJ Learning in those days. That was the company that we created on the 1st of April 2010, and it was literally the day after I resigned.
Wow!
And the day
April Fool's Day. That's another courageous
April Fool's Day. Yeah, absolutely. So it's 14 years a few days ago.
Yeah.
So I started the company on the 1st of April 2010, and literally I have worked every single day ever since, but differently.
Yeah.
I've been in schools all over the country and into Europe and beyond, because of the pandemic, and in terms of being able to work like this remotely.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey. Now, you asked the question is, so what was the realization? There was a gnawing realization, but there were things that happened along the way. And this is as school performance tables were growing, the significance of them, and the sort of message around parents understanding the choice of school. So, catchments disappear and waiting lists and school choice happened. And in me, there's that kind of question of, well, really, what is it that you're choosing? Are you choosing an experience, or are you choosing the route to the highest grades possible? Well, yeah, the highest grades possible. Everybody wants to achieve that, but in what? And then I began to see schools that were ditching subjects. Like, for example, I walked into a school, I won't say where, but the children were literally doing English, maths, science, and four choice subjects, of which 2 of them were already prescribed because they have to do humanities and a language. So really, it was a very constrained curriculum, and they were struggling desperately with attendance and behavior. And, it was quite a challenging school. But there was no PE, there was no PSHCE, there was no citizenship education. There was nothing about a broader ethic. It was just exams. And the children were beginning to vote with their feet, both behaviorally, say that right, and in attendance. And I went in and said, look, well, brain science tells us that children need oxygen in their heads, so to be able to think better. So why not get them out on the field playing some games? And what about teamwork? And what about the ability to react to challenges and changes?
Solve and critical
exactly
thinking.
And the answer was no, we don't do that stuff. It's about exam results, and we're going to get the best results. And how do we get these kids to get better results?
I hear that so many times, and there's the forward thinking schools that get it, and there's the schools that are stuck in that and entrenched in it. And I find it really confusing how this justification keeps going along when there's so much science. Like, you're not going to get the attainment, you're not going to get the attendance, you're going to have very sick teachers and very sick children and very sick parents. Why keep banging your head against that wall? I find it really bizarre that there's sort of, education, it's around intelligence. These very intelligent people can't seem to grasp the correlation between being able to have a more holistic approach to education. Is that because the system is so much pressure, and you have to achieve no matter what? It doesn't matter what the collateral damage is. What do you think? I mean, we've had this conversation previously anyway, and something that you said really landed with me. What you think the problem is, a big problem, I know, but what is the biggest thing? And you mentioned something about measurement, and that really landed with me. It's, what are we measuring? So do you think the crux of the matter is the measurement is incorrect?
Yeah, I do. I unequivocally, that's the essence of what we're doing. Is we have said that a set of grades are the measure of a child at an age. Yeah. And so people, and that's the response, the school that I've just referred to, and the school I'm thinking of, I can take you to 50, 100 schools that are doing similarly. And I think teachers are part of, and you just described it, a system that is imposed by government that has reputational and professional implications if you don't stick to them, because there's Ofsted and then there's performance tables and all of that, more and more
mortgages. Everyone's paying, even if they doesn't sit
Absolutely.
with them, you're paying. It's your livelihood, and that. But what challenge emotionally and psychologically? That's horrendous for teachers, for staff, not knowing. I mean, you've obviously been there yourself, not knowing what's the right thing to do. And my wings are clipped. I'm constrained, and I have to do a job that feels immoral and wrong. And I've seen a lot of teachers that I've worked with over the past probably 6-7 years that have left education, and the difference in them physically, emotionally, and psychologically is so profound. Just watching the difference in their health, leaving that job, and that just absolutely terrifies the life out of me. I think it's terrifying.
And the government talks about, that they advertise teaching as that, set off some fires. A child is ripe for the future. But then, I mean, if you study any of the stuff that Ken Robinson wrote, so Ken Robinson, that idea that children are the testing for creativity. Children at sort of a pre-nursery age are immensely creative in the way they play. And Ken Robinson will tell you that by the time they get to 16, all of that creativity has been educated out of them. And it coming from a creative subject, I find that really troubling. And again, exactly as you said, what's the result of it? Staff that feel, I mean, obviously, if you're an English teacher, there's creative writing. If you're a science teacher, there's creative activity within, the application of science. But that idea that's so regimented that it's kind of, you stick to this curriculum because that's what we've got to cover. And that's where I have perhaps some resistance to this knowledge-based curriculum, because we're forgetting the skills that go with knowledge. But my reaction, and that's why, coming back to what question you asked earlier, why smart curriculum? I believe within the systems, there are ways of being a successful school. I've proved it many, many times, and allowing children to be creative and exploring alternatives for them while still performing against the tables. It doesn't mean that you have to regiment the school simply to be here's the performance outcomes, therefore this is what you've got to do, and that's the only thing we're going to do and nothing else, because we're human beings and we're not like that. And that expression that I use, I'll repeat it because it drives a lot of my questions. We become what we measure. If we want to change what we are, we need to explore what we're measuring. And are we measuring the right things? And are we looking at the right things? And if what we're looking at is measuring the amount of knowledge that we have at the end of school, we are more than that. And we need to look at other things about your engagement. Yes, attendance. Yes, to me, more destination. One of the questions I ask a lot of leaders is, how many of your children end up doing what they wanted to do?
Good question.
The answer I get is, well, how would I measure that? Well, are you asking the questions? Have you got data on which you could explore? So what do children want to do? So we used to do, I've done it with a number of schools, early career profiling. So what we do it with primary schools, picture my life. And it's a real visualization method of saying, well, okay, how does the inputs that we're putting in during school change my thinking about my future? So, picture my future is another way of describing it. So what is shaping a child's thoughts about what's coming? And it's quite sad to see some of that. And in other ways, it's invigorating to see how you can actually change a child's thoughts. Idea of being a thought leader, we've forgotten that in teaching.
Absolutely. And I think that's for me, because my big sort of what I do in most of the areas that I work in is around holistic health. That's brain health or physical, or using the environment. And I think for me, I work with a lot of young people, and I've been in so many isolation rooms. I've got tattoos and mad hair, and I'm just good at engaging young people, troubled young people, the naughty kids that won't engage. And can you fix them and make them do as they're told? Absolutely not, because there's nothing wrong with them. I'm going to help them find, their way to learn, and it's not going to be in this environment over here. Some children are brilliant, great. I was really academic in school, and I love school, ironically, but I recognize that a lot of people don't. And I think I've had this conversation with so many people over the years, and it might seem like a very simple way to put it, but I keep asking the same question when it comes to education. Why is it so important to get these to get the good grades? Why? Well, so that you can go to uni. Okay, why is that important? So that you can get the best job. Why is that important? So you can earn a lot of money. And why is that important? So that you can lead a happy life. Well, let's just cut the crap in the middle, because we're not going to lead a happy life if we're not looking after that and learning how to live a happy life in the process. And that for me is what's broken. Is I understand attainment, I understand all of the concepts and why we have to do what we do, but there's half of it's missing, that experiential learning and working out what you need, not what you're expected to do, what you think you should do. What do you need? And it's just lost, isn't it? Lost for staff and for students. And then
James, can I come in? That's something you said there that I hear that expression many, many times over, and it's that get good grades so you can get in the sixth form, so you can go to university. And I've asked the question of a lot of school leaders, okay, so what about those that don't go to uni? What happens to them? And actually, one school leader looked at me with that kind of stunned amazement.
Glazed.
No one's ever asked me that before.
Wow.
I said, well, look, just think about it. The teachers in your school, every teacher in your school has been successful at education, because every one of them has got a degree.
Indeed.
Every one of them has been successfully through the process. What about those that haven't? So I never looked at it like that. I never thought, what do you mean? So, well, what about the 50% that don't go to university? And what about the 70% that don't end up, or the 40% that don't end up in your sixth form? I've never thought about them. Well, I said, that's the problem. You've not thought about them.
Yep, that's the problem. Different learning styles, different personalities, different. And when we can go into hours and hours talking about, ACEs and trauma-informed practice and all, so many things, so many variables, isn't there? But the point is, if an education system isn't fit for everyone, then it isn't fit for anyone at all. So it has to fit everybody's wants and needs. And people say, well, that's just not possible. Well, it's not under the current system. Of course it's not, but it's possible. It's been proven time and time again.
Absolutely. And the essence of that is this understanding that one size fits all.
Yes.
And in the system, there's so much talk about the pressure is on teachers. And you come back to what you said earlier about the mindset and the health of teachers, is because they're struggling with that one size fits everybody. Yeah. And the kind of drive in the education terms is to adaptive teaching. So you've got to adapt your teaching for the children that are in the room, irrespective of who's there. And I would say, and this is where Smart Curriculum has kind of built the methodologies around it, is we need to step back to adaptive curriculum. We adapt a curriculum that's fit for purpose, because if we don't, what we end up with is SEN, send alternative learning needs, or whatever the description and wherever you come from, what that's described as becomes additionality. If you don't fit, then we need to do something else.
Yes.
And then we have the growth of AP, alternative provision. If you don't fit, then leave the building and go somewhere else and do something else. Well, why does that have to be? I mean, yes, there are some resourcing issues, but that's again because our mindset is around one size fits all.
That's a systemic error, isn't it? It's not that it's not possible. That really hits home with me as well, because I feel across my work in both of my lifetimes, back in my old industry and the last 10 or 15 years doing what I'm doing now, is because I specialize in mental health. I'm a first aid for mental health instructor. My whole thing is around supporting mental health. Is the amount of damage from adults, every generation, that when you start to do some of these psychotherapeutic activity and you start to dig out the weeds of why do you think, feel and behave like this, whereas it comes from this experience, this I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm not measuring up to this, and it causes all kinds of problems. And for me, it comes from the fact that if you are going to follow this linear route that we say is acceptable and we say it makes you smart and clever and brilliant and amazing, then great. If you don't, you have to go to AP, you have to go over there, you're a bit stupid, you're a bit dumb, and it's so unnecessary. It's like, well, you learn this way, great, there's an option for you there. You learn this way, that's just as valid and that's great, and you learn this way over here. It shouldn't be that much of a polarity, and that weird, bizarre concept that somehow if you don't learn this way, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. That for me is what has to change, and I recognize that the current system isn't really set up to do that, although they recognize it. I think everyone I speak to is like, yeah, we know that's the problem, but it is what it is. Let's carry on anyway.
And then we come back to what we're trying to measure.
What we're measuring.
So the metric that we're using to be successful is actually focused on the system, yes, and not on the child.
Yes.
And that's why we need to look again at, yeah, what we are measuring, because we are not measuring for the benefit of the children. We're measuring for the benefit of the system. So the system can say, to use political language, we're the best in the world, but it's not. It's not.
I would say, look at these children and these adults and these older adults that would say that the system is a massive failure, because we have progressed so much, especially now with, the Gen Z. We've got these children that operate in a completely different way, being forced into spaces that are Victorian and post-war principles that do not work anymore. They are just not fit. It's not fit for purpose. Brains are, and you can see by statistics and mental health, neurodivergence, you can see we're evolving in a different way, but we are constricting and we're harming people by not catching up with that with education. So, and I mean, I've even thought before now, I've been chair of governors for, my kids have all left school now, but I'm still chair of governors for their primary school. And I've thought, I wonder if we could have a governor uprising, because my governor training tells me that we always have to question, so what, what decisions are you making? How does that benefit the child? And I can see, and I've said this before, very controversial, but also very true in my opinion, absolute neglect, safeguarding issues. I really can see it for young people and for the adults in the system. Serious neglect and harm being caused, psychological harm, by being forced into a situation that's not conducive to good health. So I thought, I wonder whether the governors could challenge that en masse, a governor revolution. But it's hard, for the same reason as teachers struggle so much, for people to, even though they feel it, and there's groups of people, I've got thousands of people on all these groups that will talk about it, but bringing these things forward is a challenge, because, we don't put our head above the parapet because it's not safe, and we just kind of just don't rock the boat, and I can't do anything about it anyway. And so I think more of us that are kind of having the conversations and finding clever ways to leverage our skills to create some changes without being, without causing any kind of conflict. That's the way, I think. So just explain a little bit more, if you don't mind, around smart curriculum and how that works, because I know that a lot of the staff that I'll be sharing this with and people that I know in education will be really, really interested, and it would be great to set up some conversations around that. So give me a bit of an overview of what you do and how it works.
It's hard fought stuff. We've done it with lots of schools, and we can talk about the negatives. I'd love to talk about some of the positives, and without naming schools, but just to answer your question. So over the last 14 years, we've developed this methodology and thinking into sort of 4 product lines. So we call it MASS, the MASS that is smart curriculum. So that's mastery programs, which are exactly, so standing with learners and helping them and training them and being with them to see the journey differently. So the mastery is that training and coaching kind of programs. Analytics, a lot of schools said to me initially, look, we can't do all this stuff, we can't afford it, we're broke, we haven't got enough money. So I developed ways of looking at curriculum and saying, we can find you money. And typically in a standard secondary school, I know this sounds a bit brash, and I don't mean it arrogantly, but I can find you £250,000 out of most budgets in a secondary school that would enable you to do some of these things differently. You will have to make some difficult decisions, and it's not about sacking staff. It is about looking at your need against your resource.
Coaching is in itself, isn't it, of managing your budget?
Yeah. So we have an online system where we take all of your staffing data and all of your school provision. We put it into the pot and say, look, this is what you're doing. Now rethink it. So it's deep analytics, it's insightful understanding, and people pay a yearly subscription to go into that. And we've got schools that have been with us since we started. We actually started selling that 6 years ago, and we've got schools that are now solvent and doing things really differently because they're able to look at it and say, we understand. And then the 2 S's are standards. So we look at the standards stuff, looks at special needs education, looks at attendance strategies, looks at sort of teaching and learning activities. So we really do get into the sort of nuts and bolts of how schools work. And then scheduling is at most secondary schools. rely on somebody to make the logistics work. And I'm a master timetabler. I've been doing it for 25, 30 years now. And I've got a team of schedulers. So there's 7 others who are involved in helping schools, secondary schools, particularly in that case, to reschedule. But we do work with all through schools and primary schools, and but they don't necessarily need the scheduling with primary schools in the same way. But that package now. So what does it mean within the auspices of the government requirements? We are able to say, look, these are some ideas about how you could shape your school differently. And I'll give you one example. We were working with a school that had a really low attendance rate. They were in one of the education investment areas in England, real attendance problem. Now, completely set aside from the money that was given by the government, we were asked to go in and work with the school. Huge attendance issues, violence in the school, mental health problems all the way through, school refusers, massive SEN department. I basically said, look, you want the children doing things, we need to get into, they had a workshop, back to my DT days. It was stuffed full of school play sets, just the flats and props and everything. It was rammed to the doors. You couldn't get in the room. Well, if you could clear that lot off, let's have a look at what's inside. And inside this room was the brand new equipment that had never even been touched. More equipment than I've ever seen in any workshop. Wow. So I said, well, if we can find a teacher, we could do some great stuff here. We went into and just refer back to the exclusion room. I went into this suite of rooms that were there for internal exclusion. There were 3 rooms in a line, regimented. I said, well, what could we do with this? And I asked, I worked with the team and looked at it. They wanted to do hairdressing. I said, well, okay, so let's see what we can do. And they now have 3 beautiful hairdressing salons that replace the exclusion rooms. And now they're delivering hair and beauty, engineering, food technology. Kids are growing herbs in the herb garden out the back and making real food for real activity. And their attendance has gone up. The disturbance around the school has gone down. Their SEN department is now more focused on cognitive recovery rather than naughty children. And the school is on a trajectory for improvement. And they're actually thinking about introducing a sixth form to get a kind of a height of higher learning going on in school. The art department is fantastic, some of the stuff they produce. But once you've got all those in place, English results are going up, maths results are going up, history is more accessible because the children enjoy learning. We've gone from a member of staff who, his first day in the school was thumped and knocked out as he walked in the door. He's now a well-respected member of staff, and I walk down the corridors with him, and people come up to him and say, "Sir, can you do this?" and "Sir, can you do that?" and "Is this working?" and "Am I okay?" and does they're engaged. There's a relationship, and they're measuring different stuff. Now that's just one example, and I can take you to loads and loads of those. And it's being smart, and that's what smart curriculum is about. It's knowing what you've got to do, but doing it differently.
Yes, it is. It's a reframe. It's a complete reframe, isn't it? And it's working within the constraints that are already there and we can't do anything about. In an ideal world, and we've spoken about this before, I would love there to just be alternative provision is mainstream provision. People just learn in different spaces. It's, things are happening, but we have to work with what the current system it operates within. And I think that it seems to me the perfect way to do it. Really, really smart, really intelligent ways of working. And I can just see how that would work in terms of bringing the data up that's needed. It's just doing things that work for everybody and protecting and supporting people. And I think the work that I do when I'm not chatting away on my podcast, around mental health and around psychology and around how to support people who are experiencing a sympathetic nervous system response 24 hours a day, which teachers are I went to the Wellbeing Conference in Cardiff a few years ago, and that was before lockdown, so it would have been 2019. And the stats were showing that teachers have more significant issues around that than nursing staff and doctors and people in the ER room, because of their relationship with time, the school day, the year, having to manage 30 odd different emotions and situations in one go, and not very much in the way of adult communication. Lots of things will go into that. And it just made me think that there's so much support that isn't there that should be there for teaching staff. And I think, there's a nice combination there that could be explored with when you're going in and trying to get people to think differently. If they're stuck in that defensive, deflective, you don't understand, I haven't got time, I can't, the budget doesn't allow it, then there's scope there to look at some soft touch, gentle, let's kind of manage how we think, feel and behave, and bring those responses down so that you can open up to that critical space. There's a nice blend there of opening the door in a safe way and protecting people's emotions and protecting their minds as they're going through change. Because change management, we know it's just difficult, isn't it? It's tough. So I think there's just so many great things, and we could just talk forever, couldn't we? I know how crazy busy you are, and I don't want to take this up too much further, because I'd like to revisit, and I'd like to do some more little topics and conversations as and when you have time throughout the year. And we have our webinar on the 1st of May coming up. So we're going to be able to speak to more educators and look at how maybe we can combine resources to get in and support schools that really need it in a very holistic way, which is really exciting. So I'm going to add the links at the end of this to that. And I'm going to add the links to yourself and any links you want to share so people can get in touch.
Thank you.
So I just have 3 questions before we kind of finish this particular session. And the first one is a big one. But it'd be interesting to see, I've got guests from all over the world that work in very different spaces, but I'm just interested to collate these responses. In your opinion, what can we do to change the world? How can we change things? How do we change the world?
I thought long and hard about the answer to this. And to me, I come back to what I said at the beginning. We've got to get into our heads a different approach. And one of those is to undo the emphasis on knowledge and build more of an understanding of skill. So get away from the I know about to I know how to.
I can do.
And just that there's a whole lot of deeper pedagogy in there. There's a whole lot of deeper psychological implications to it. But the emphasis on living in your head to living out and doing is something that I've seen so many times, children particularly getting very frustrated. And so I would very simply say to change the emphasis from knowledge to skill.
I love that. I think it's brilliant. And that kind of translates into so many different areas, doesn't it? It translates everywhere. And for me, from a holistic perspective, the health benefits from just flipping that mindset into practical application and the body and movement and motion and building and making and doing and feeling proud of yourself and achieving things. It's not here. It's a physical action. So I love that. I love it. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Question number 2 for you, bringing it down from the macro to the micro, is can you, one little tip just from your personal perspective, what do you think people can do, just a small thing in their everyday lives just to help them feel better? Because the podcast is called The Art of Feeling Better. So I'm trying to build a toolkit from all my connections of things that might be useful tips to put into daily practice.
Yeah, again, it just maybe the way I approach things, just work out the why. Just work out the why, because if you know why you're doing something, there's more purpose around it. If you're shopping because you need food. If you're relaxing because you need time to relax. Just find the why, and you can apply that to work. And I found that back in 2010. Why did I want to stay in education? Because I could have kind of gone off and done all sorts of other things. I think I didn't, but because I am passionate about the education of young people. And find the why. It's just a simple little thing, and take time to consider why you're doing what you're doing.
I love that. And that, we could have planned it. I've literally just been recording some lessons, some micro lessons around values and working out purpose and identity, and that whole thing that we think we know why we're doing something. We actually don't. We're just dragged along with societal expectations. So beautiful. I'm going to use that as a little segue into
Fine. A pleasure.
Brilliant. No, so find the why. Brilliant. And my last question is we've got a playlist on Spotify, the Art of Feeling Better playlist. So I'm asking every single guest to give me one feel-good tune, a song that just makes you feel happy, lights you up, and we'll get it added to the list.
Do you know, I'm not one for remembering songs. My daughter is. I mean, she's an encyclopedia of music, and just mentioned something. And do you know the one I came back to? It's really strange. Chris Rea, Driving Home for Christmas.
Oh,
If you read the last bit, it says, "I took a look at the driver next to me. He's just the same, driving home for Christmas."
oh wow.
That is, to me, that's, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And we'll come to the territory mapping at another point, but that's it. Who do you want round your fire?
Yeah.
I want to look to somebody who's just the same as me, who's struggling with the same things, looking at the same stuff. So when I hear it in the shops, when you're shopping at Christmas, I know a lot of people don't like Chris Rea, but there we go.
I love it.
I like that. Driving Home for Christmas.
Driving Home for Christmas. And do you know what? I love it because I never, ever anticipate what people are going to say. It's great. I always will have an expectation of maybe the kind of genre or what I think. But yeah, I've had some brilliant things so far. So I'm going to get that straight on there. I love it. And it is, we're all in the same storm. We're just not all in the same boat. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Some of us have huge yachts and some have dinghies with holes in, and we're all kind of fighting the same fights, really, aren't we? So
absolutely.
Brilliant. Chris, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And I think there's so many bigger conversations to be had. And I know that a lot of my network in education are going to be lit up by this, and I've been waiting for some conversation to start that will mean something. So I think we'll have a lot more questions, and I'm going to encourage questions and people to get in touch with you, and maybe a follow-up at some point where we can take some positive action and explore a little bit further if you're up for that.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Jane. And yeah, it's about the conversation. So if we can keep the conversation going, more than happy to be part of it.
Yeah, wonderful. I think the more we can get it out there, the more people can get involved, can't they? So brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to stop my recording now. So thank you so much for speaking to me. And now I've got to find out how tech works and work out how to stop my recording.